What's good? Welcome back. In the last episode, we timed our very first plus 26, which then turned into a plus 27 Atal'Dazar. This is some really good RNG, as Atal is a great key to roll into. So I hit up a few friends, and the following day we assemble a team to take on the dungeon. We lock it in and focus up. It's episode 7 on our road to Mythic Plus title. So for this run, I'm in Discord comms with everyone except the Evoker, who we picked up through LFG as a pug. We decide to go left to the start and play the packs of Augurs, Juggernauts, and Confessors. Since we're in comms, we have coordinated stops and kicks, making this section of the dungeon very chill, and in my opinion, a lot easier than trying to go right at the start and play the totem dudes. The only problem here is that we don't have an easy way to bait the Juggernaut's charge. I ask about this at the start of the key, but the druid is confident he can pull it off, so we plan around having him bait, which for the most part ends up working out pretty well. Aside from our evoker eating like 10 different charges, because they weren't in our call, they probably don't know our druid is baiting and stood out as a result, but somehow they live every charge, so that also works, I guess. We then slam through this early trash and get to the priestess boss with no deaths. After engaging the boss, we're going into our second transfusion, but our healer has to run across the map for a pool. They then fall behind in healing and eventually die along with our evoker. Neither of the rogues nor tank have a way to combat res, so we have no way to get them back up, and we slowly rot out, resulting in a wipe. Is what you thought I was going to say, but our DH actually manages to stay alive long enough and kill the boss. So while a bit of a messy kill, the timer in Atal is forgiving, and we sped through the first section of trash, meaning we could afford to lose some time here. But after killing the first boss, we then proceed to do some weird stuff. As we're running back, the tank tries to pull a 2-pack Augur and Juggernaut into a pack of 4 at the bottom of the steps, which seems fine at first glance, but there are a few problems here. Firstly, the Augur needs 2 people with short kicks to keep it moving. The tank is busy moving to the next pack, so that means it's the other rogue and I. But this leads to issue 2, which is that by playing Assassination, by default, I use Crippling Poison. So we're trying to drag these mobs, but it's taking a minute. Then thirdly, because we're all grouped up on the stairs, the Juggernaut charges into us, killing our healer. I then die to the fire, followed shortly by the other rogue and evoker. So we run it back again, killing off the 2 mobs, but at this point the timer is now a concern. In a last ditch effort, we start pulling crazy big in an attempt to recover some of the lost time. But we end up dying to the mini boss after we pull an additional Sky Screamer and Sarid pack in. So we deplete the key and the evoker dips out, but the remaining 4 of us run back the 26. This time we decide to send a different route, and go into Razan first with a couple packs of Sarids. Which is a great first pull in theory, but things don't exactly go as planned.
Dude,
I got him. It's fine. We just go down. Just go. I got him. I got it. I'm dropping a dart down on your boss.
What? He reset?
oh.
Okay.
Just I guess. And the boss resets on us. When we were talking about it after the fact, we think it may have had something to do with the stalker we accidentally pulled in, which, by the way, is why you never run down the right side of the ramp, and while waiting for Razan to respawn, the tank goes to pull the pack of 2 Sky Screamers, so we have something to DPS in the meantime with the eventual goal of pulling them into Razan. I call out I'll kick circle, and Razan then spawns across the map. So the rest of our group heads over to Razan, but I'm stuck hitting a slowed mob waiting for it to cast so I can then kick it and leave. Needless to say, we are way out of position. The other rogue then pulls aggro and dies, and our tank then gets feared and dies, so we wipe and run it back for a 3rd time. This time, we manage to kill the big dinosaur and head over to clear the packs of Augurs and Confessors. Our Resto Druid is once again baiting the charge, but one problem with the way we're baiting these charges is that because our Resto Druid is baiting the charges at max range and I'm using Crippling Poison, the Juggernauts don't fully make it back before their next charge, meaning the melee gets charged and I go down. Without my kick, the Confessor's bubble goes off and the rest of our group rots out. The tank does manage to keep the pull going, but it takes us a little while to get through it. We have a few more deaths to charges on the following trash packs, but we make it to the pre-sys boss when the other rogue starts having some real bad leg issues and eventually DCs. So we call GG there, and the rest of the squad dips out, and I turn to LFG to run back the 25. And in the 25, we manage to have a clean run up until we engage Yasma, and the following situation occurs.
Go again. Yo, what?
So the pug killer boss strikes once again, and it's almost hilarious how fast our group dies once our priest goes down. In the moment, I thought I caught the edge of a wandering spider, which then killed me, but looking back at the video, it was actually the paladin that triggered the spider, but since I was next to the paladin, the radius explosion caught me and I went down. And the evoker coincidentally got racking pain at that exact moment and then also died. So we reset and run it back with 3 minutes left to kill Yasma. The timer is very tight, but maybe it's possible? Unfortunately, later during the encounter, I shadow step back to the boss and run into the spider. The pally gets me back up, but later goes down themselves, and we don't have any other B-res classes, so we have to 4-man the rest of the fight, but at this point it's a little too late as we've already passed the timer. Our group tries to finish the key, but I end up dying to another spider later on, and we wipe with 1.5% of the boss's health remaining. At which point GG's is called and it's back to LFG to reform to try to run back the 24. For this run we play the trash at the left to start, then head over to Rizan. But as we're hitting Rizan, I then pull threat on the raptors, get meleeed, and the Sards finish me off. After which point our boomkin then gets fixated by the boss, runs straight into a pile of bones and gets eaten. There are still a bunch of Sards up, so our group rots out and we go again. This time around, we pull a pack of Sards into the boss, and our monk goes from 100 to 0 real fast. Watching the VOD back, it looks like they had threat on a raptor and then got meleeed. We have battle res so we get them back up, but now with 3 raptors and the boss, our DK tank then falls over. So it's been a rough start, but I think the key is still timeable. However, as the rest of our party resets the boss, they butt pull another pack of Sards, and the following occurs.
Hey, we're still fine. Yo. Oh, I'm gonna go crazy, dude. Oh my god.
So I guess we're trying the 23. The once mighty plus 27 Keystone has been depleted all the way to a plus 23. At this point, I figure I'll just play Outlaw. The Keystone is low enough to the point where I'm not super worried about my damage, so we run it back, and thankfully, this time managed to complete the key. And with the 2 chest, our Keystone turns into a plus 25 Waycrest. My previous best in this dungeon is a plus 24, so after the sequence of depleted Atal'Dazars, it felt pretty good rolling into a key that had potential to provide score. And we're rewarded with a Midas Talisman, a very strong trinket for Outlaw Rogues. So I upgrade it to 483 and toss it on. We then throw up our key in LFG and assemble a team to take on the dungeon. And for this run, I decided to say Outlaw, which was a pretty big decision to make at the time, because it would mark my first time trying to push my Mythic Plus score as Outlaw. We're no longer just doing practice keys. Also, since I've last talked about the spec a couple episodes ago, I've made a few more weak auras to track some additional abilities. This doesn't end up being the final form of my Outlaw UI, but I think it's a step in the right direction for where we eventually end up. I'm also now playing Keep It Rolling after having learned it's the more kind of meta Outlaw spec right now. Then moving into the run itself, we absolutely slam through the first 3 bosses with only 3 deaths. Our team only begins to have issues during the mini-boss, as we pull the mini-boss with a captain and witch, because here our healer dies to an edge cast, and without a healer we slowly die off to this pack. The tank stays alive and keeps the pull going, but the problem with running back into this pack is that the witch will cast etch on each new player that runs back. So we end up chain dying to this pack several times and accumulate 11 deaths to this one pull. Then going into the next pull, 2 mobs cast on our healer, nobody kicks them, and our healer just gets blasted. I had my kick up here and all my stops available, so I'm partly to blame, and not solving casts ends up being the theme of this pull as the Mage Annihilator go down. But after this series of deaths, we sped through the rest of the dungeon, timing the key with more than 4 minutes to spare. and netting ourselves 13 Mythic plus score. Then concerning my Outlaw gameplay, I thought I did fine, in the sense that I didn't think I was weighing the group down, but I definitely still have a long ways to go. From what I hear, Outlaw has a pretty high skill ceiling, and you can really feel it when you make a mistake playing the spec. Like, it's very momentum based. So if something causes that momentum to come to a stop, either by your own mistake or through dying, it's very noticeable. Also, Outlaw requires a lot more button presses than Assassination, and this was my reaction to it after the key.
Oh, my hand. That shit hurt. What a crazy spec.
My Keystone then turns into a plus 26 Blackrock hold, but since we've already completed that key, the following day I queue into a plus 25 Galakrond's Fall, this time swapping back to Assassination. And this run goes fairly smooth. We have a couple deaths on manifested timeways to some dispels, and the priest in our group was giving me PI at the most random of times, but we timed the dungeon about 4 minutes under the timer, netting us a further plus 12 score. I then try to queue into some other dungeons, but after waiting around for a bit, I decide instead to send my Blackrock hold in the hopes of timing it and proccing another plus 27 Keystone. We have a couple deaths on the first pull. I get hit with a Soul Blast and Soul Blades cast at the same time. Then a little bit later, during the mini-boss, the mobs are positioned kind of funny with the mini-boss further back than everything else. So when I go to kick the Counselor cast, I then need a frontal and die. In hindsight, I might not have needed to run as close as I did, but I wasn't sure how close I needed to be to kick the caster, aka my focus target. And I'm actually not the only melee that gets hit, as our Rep Pally also gets the frontal debuff, but Rep Paladins are giga tanky, so my death ends up being the only one to this pack. Then later during the run, after we finished off one of the packs of ads, our priest is dead and being rezzed, so I have the idea to run ahead and trigger the next set of ads to spawn, only I didn't know that doing so would immediately put you and your entire group in combat, cancelling the res and forcing us to send a B-res instead. Our paladin also stands in an arrow barrage and dies, so this pack ends up taking quite a while to take down. Then later, a bunch of our party gets breathed on by some juiced up scavenger ads and we have to run back. But after these deaths, the rest of the run goes off without much issue and we're able to just beat the timer. And my Keystone upgrades to a plus 27 fall, which like AD or Atal'Dazar is another great key to roll into. So we assemble the squad and pull up to the dungeon. And like most fall experiences, we're going to fast forward here to the second boss. Because during this fight, our hunter goes down during a chrono faded overlap. I'm not sure why they were standing in the light section without a debuff here, but we commit a battle res to get them back up, and then later we're hit with a slow dispel and our hunter ends up going down. After which point we're slow to recover out of it, and on the following set of debuffs, the healer and I end up going down, resulting in a wipe. I call GG's and that's the end of it, which looking back, I think may have been premature. Had we gone again and had a clean run, I think we would have had a decent chance at timing the dungeon, but because I was new to the plus 27 scene, I felt this sort of pressure of needing to have a clean run, and when we failed, I didn't want to waste people's time, which led to me calling the key. Which is like the totally wrong mentality to have, by the way. If you're bothering to assemble a team to run your Keystone, you more than anyone have the authority to use that full duration to try and time that dungeon. So just because we're not gonna like two-chest it or something, doesn't mean we don't do it. But anyways, I wanted to share my thoughts on that in case somebody else that's watching this has gone through something similar. So I queue up the 26 instead, picking up the first Preservation Evoker I've seen this season, and we do a huge pull at the start, collecting all the trash up to the first boss.
Bro, there's so many fucking mobs.
We blast through the first boss and proceed to have several more deaths to the trash before the second boss, but thankfully this time around our team slams manifested timeways. Making our way to Blade of Galakrond, I stand in a frontal, get battle rezzed, then die after yoinking the corrosion debuff.
Bro! Hey, lock in, lock in, lock in.
I get B-rezzed once more, but then our Boomy goes down, followed by our DH, and then myself once more. We have another B-res come up later in the fight, so our Druid grabs our DH and we're able to finish the encounter. We clear through the last few trash packs before shrouding to the final boss. But here our Evoker doesn't come with us. I pan my camera around and see them backpedaling, at which point I peace out, leaving them behind. Luckily, they have Invispot, so they make it past, and we engage the final boss. We have plenty of time remaining at this point, and in my opinion, if we can get past Manifested Timeways and Blade of Galakrond, this fight should follow. Except our healer dies on the first group soak, shortly followed by everyone else. So we have to release and run back, or do we? Always take a second and ask yourself whether or not releasing is the right thing to do. Because in this case, both druids, myself, and the evoker release and run back. The druids and I can stealth past the final trash pack, but the evoker cannot. And now they don't have Invispot, and my shroud is on cooldown. So when previously the druids could have resurrected the healer, they now have to death skip past the last trash pack. However, after all is said and done, we engage the boss a second time with 6 minutes left. Meaning the key should still be timeable, barring we can all stay alive. And that we managed to do, albeit just barely. As we finish the key 25 seconds under the timer, this gets us 8 more Mythic Plus rating and turns my Keystone into a plus 27 Blackrock Hold, which is another great Keystone. We're rolling into some really good dungeons, so of course we queue it up. And on the first pull, I need to send my cooldowns into a mob that isn't the Protector, because once it begins to channel Sacrifice Soul, it dies way too fast, and I lose a lot of damage. Later on, the Evoker goes down to a cast that gets through, and then I die after getting a couple stacks of Soul Blade. I tried to press Cloak, but I was a split second too late. Otherwise, we blast through the mini-boss and the first boss before running up the steps into a pool of spiders, where our Warlock pulls threat on one of the spiderlings and dies. And this really hurts us, because when they release, I don't do enough damage on my own to kill off the spiderlings before the tank falls over, resulting in a wipe. As a DPS player, you just gotta be mindful of threat on this pull because of how much ground the tank needs to cover when gathering. Then a bit later, we rot out to a double pack, the cat's bleed slowly takes our group out. Apparently this is the mob you should pry out first. I didn't know this at the time, so I was hitting the high health ad, but the tank was sure to let me know after the fact. And after this pull, we had a few more one-off deaths, but the rest of the dungeon went pretty smooth. And we finished the key 1 minute under the timer, completing my first plus 27 Keystone of the series, and bringing our Mythic Plus score up to 3,262. I was pretty stoked after timing this key, and would have been happy to call it there. But at this point, it's getting late into a Monday night, the weekly reset is the following day, so I figure whatever, I got nothing to lose, and we queue up the plus 28 Waycrest my Keystone turned into. Now, to provide some context, at this point, I'm pretty sure there was maybe one assassination rogue in the world that had done a Waycrest at a level 28 or higher, so I figured the odds of me timing this key were pretty low. But fuck it, we attack. The pally shares the route and we dive straight in. Except that on the first pull, our paladin then veers off the route, pulling the pack in the corner with the disciple. So while the rest of our group wasn't expecting it, we play it, and we play it pretty well, until I suddenly die, followed by the mage and then the rest of our party. I don't know what killed me here. The only thing I can think of is that I may have stood in a frontal, but it's nearly impossible to see the ground with all the overlapping ground effects. In any case, that was our bloodlust, and needless to say, I didn't have my hopes up, so we call GG's and I run back to 27. In this run, we go straight into the first boss with an essence ad, and I end up getting mind controlled while attacking Selena right before I go into my cooldowns, which turns out to be a good thing, because it offsets my cooldowns from the Frost Mage, and we end up nuking this boss. We then proceed to have a very clean run up until the trash before Ral, where we end up having a few deaths to the maggots spitting on various people. But once we're past the maggots, we clear through Ral and make our way to a big trash pull with the mini-boss. There are a bunch of different kicks and stops in this pull, and unfortunately I go down to a runic bolt cast that doesn't get stopped. I could have blinded here, even if it overlapped with something else, like let's say hypothetically somebody else had stopped that cast and I pressed blind. This outcome is always better than the one where nobody presses anything and I end up dead. Luckily, the rest of the group holds it down while I run back, and we get through the pull, heading into the final big pull with several soul essences, a diviner, and a soul charmer, where 2 casts go off on me and I go down. I do get battle resed, but then our healer goes down and we slowly fall apart. Again, I had cloak here, so I could have lived. I just really need to get in the habit of putting my kit on cooldown. Anyways, we were already cutting the timer pretty close, and with this wipe, we're now no longer within time. So we call GG's, and that ends up being my final key done for this week of Fortified. And with it, we're going to end the episode here. Next time, we'll see what our vault has in store and take on a new set of tyrannical keys. And if you haven't already, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you're notified when a new video drops. For those of you that have been following along with the series thus far, thank you so much for the support. It means a lot to me that these videos are landing, and I want you to know that both the positive and constructive feedback hasn't gone unnoticed. So thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one.